this spring. Only one hero can save her family and prevent disaster.
Mom, we're gonna be late for school!
I don't think so.
Whoa.
Experience the phenomenon that critics are calling inspiring.
Mom, I can't find number 17!
Come on, Billy! Dig deep!
A lot of fun. And pure genius.
Mom, where's my phone?
Table.
Keys.
Mudroom.
Dragon Man?
Under the couch between the monkey and the flip-flop.
How does she do that?
Created by God to demonstrate his love with grace, elegance, and poise. Is Mom.
Hey, honey, have you seen my butane torch?
Well, good morning again. Today we are celebrating moms. And as you can tell from the small army that was on stage earlier, we have quite a few of those in the church, okay? If not one person who did all of that, there's lots of them. So we want to spend a few moments today celebrating our mothers. And I know what people say. People are always like, well, I don't think we should have a day just to celebrate moms. I think moms should be celebrated every day. And why I agree with that sentiment and that understanding, I would argue to the contrary, that if anybody deserves a day, it's moms. And so today we want to recognize them, and we're going to do that a little bit differently than we've done in the past because they're moms, it's their day. They get a nap this afternoon. Dads are cooking, watching the kids, doing everything else. And so, moms, you just stay seated. And the rest of you, if you would join me in giving our mothers a standing ovation for all their hard work and dedication. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, few people on this earth will ever know you quite like your mama knows you. And there are few people that we copy in our lives more than our mothers when it comes to decisions. There aren't many people who get the chance to know us that deeply, that well, to know what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what we're going to say, when we're going to say it. And there are some things about our mothers that we copy that we didn't want to copy, though, right? There are things that your mother told you when you were growing up that you were like, I don't care whatever my kids do, I am never saying that. But I think that's what happens. We find ourselves saying that. And so I have kind of compiled a small list of some of those sayings that we said we would never say, but we do say. And I even categorize them because sometimes I can be a bit OCD. And I thought it was fun. So the first category of sayings is the logical sayings. These make sense. They're good sayings, right? As long as you're under my roof, you'll live by my rules, right? God gave you a brain. Use it. Ask a stupid question. You get a stupid answer. See, you guys have heard some of these before. Okay. The next category is what I kind of call sarcastic. Moms have a way of doing that sometimes, right? They look at you, are your legs broken? Right? When you want something. If all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you? Shut the door. Were you born in a barn? Talking to you is like talking to a brick wall. Or my favorite, let's play the quiet game. It's a great game. And finally, and my favorite types of sayings are the completely illogical sayings that when your mom says them, you automatically behave because you're trying to figure out what on earth she's talking about, right? Things like, don't look at me with those eyes. What eyes am I supposed to look at you with? You just don't, I don't know. You better stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. I already had something, henceforth the crying to start with, right? If you make that face, it'll freeze that way. If you want to act like a child, I'll treat you like a child. Well, guess what? I'm a child, so it kind of works out, But yeah, quiet down. I can't even hear myself think. Have you ever said that one? And the all-time best response of any mother to any question ever uttered is simply, because I said so, right? Yeah, okay, great, because I said so. As I look back at my childhood, which seems so long ago, it was a time with a lot of change. And I'm not talking like the normal change of growing up. I'm talking about changes, and we moved all the time. My dad, I was born at Cherry Point Marine Corps Base because my dad was a pilot in the Marines. And so the first 3 years of my life, we were constantly on the move to different bases, different stations. He got sent overseas, and so we went to Annapolis and lived with my grandparents for a while, constantly moving. Then he left the Marines. He took a job at Ford Motor Company, and so we moved to Detroit, Michigan. And while we were there, we didn't just stay put. We lived there for about 7 years, and the first house we moved into was just me, my older brother, and then 3 others came along, so we moved across town to a bigger house. Now, the first house, I remember the school I went to was John F. Kennedy Elementary School in Livonia, Michigan, and I remember we walked to school. And it was in the snow, uphill, both ways, because that's how old I am. I use that saying. But it was in the snow. I will tell you that. And it didn't matter if the cars couldn't get out because you're walking to school. It's no problem. You can walk through the snow and you get there no problem. And so that was my first experience living there in Detroit. And then we moved across town and we went to a different school. And that school was different. I had to ride the bus to get to that school. And that year was hard for my brother and I because the administrators and teachers at school, we just didn't vibe with them very well. We got in trouble a good bit, and my dad would come in and talk to the principal, and I think my dad said at one time, he's pretty hungover from last night, so we're not going to listen to that principal anymore. So, but we also moved schools for the next year. And so we moved schools, and I really enjoyed that school, but then we decided to move again to Mississippi because, hey, we were stationary for more than 3 years. It's time to get on the move again. So we moved again to Mississippi, and that's where I did the rest of my elementary school and part of middle school. And then we moved again to Missouri. And then I graduated high school. And then we moved again to Florida. So my life was all about change. But through all of those moves and changes, one constant was my mom. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And every day I'd come home from school, mom was there. She'd have a snack, and she was ready to debrief you on the day. Because mom knew, as any of you have ever known, the longer you wait to ask a child a question, the more generic answer you're going to get to that question, right? If they immediately experience something, how was your day? It was great. This, and this happened, right? You wait a couple hours. How's your day? Good. Oh, great. You care to elaborate? No, I'm good. Oh, thanks. Fantastic. So she was always there to debrief us. But there were a few occasions when I would come home from school and mom wouldn't be there. I didn't know where she was. It would put me into complete disarray. Now, back then, we didn't have cell phones. They weren't even invented yet, right? And so all we relied on was a note system, right? Mom would leave a note, gone here. But the problem with the note system is it doesn't leave a lot of expectation with it. It's like, but when you coming back? Like, I don't know how long this takes to get there. I don't know what's going on. At one time, there was no note because my little brother, who was like 3, was sitting on the window of the van and fell out and hit his head. So they didn't have time to write a note, and they just took off. So that was fantastic. It was like midnight when they got home, and we were sitting around like, I have no clue where my parents are. I didn't know what to do. I was very hungry. I was like, what's going on? And so we did have a landline at the house, and many, my generation, we did have landlines. But the problem with the landline is that there has to be someone to call it, which means you have to have a phone. If you don't have a cell phone, you don't have a phone. So they have these things called payphones, right? Payphones are the grossest invention ever made in humanity, okay? I won't go into the details, but there's a mouthpiece people spit on, and there's an earpiece that was grosser than the mouthpiece, okay? I'm just going to say it. It is nasty. We didn't have COVID-19 when I was a kid. You know why? Because we used payphones. We had the strongest immune systems in the world. You'd already caught everything just by putting that dumb thing up to your ear, all right? It was over. And so we didn't know. And so mom would eventually come home, and then I could eat because she could cook me dinner. And so it was always a good time. But life changes and life moves quickly. What was it like for you when you were growing up? Some of you are still growing up. But what was it like? How big of a deal was mom in your house? I mean, we have these sayings like mother knows best, and if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? And those sayings didn't grow out of obscurity or imagination. Those things are proven facts, time and time again, test of time. They could be in the Bible for that matter. They are proven facts. And today, as we honor mothers, I want to spend some time focusing on one mother from the Bible in particular. Her name is Jochebed. Now, that's a horrible name, right? I was thinking when I was writing this sermon, it was too bad that we stopped at 4 kids, because if we had a 5th kid and it was a girl, perfect name, Jochebed. You go to the school, there's not going to be another Jochebed there, right? For good reason, because that's just an awful, awful name. But that was her name. And despite how bad her name was, she was actually a heroic and important mother in Scripture. So, in the Bible, there's this dude named Moses. And Moses towers like a titan over many Bible characters we study. He's mentioned in 261 verses in Exodus, 80 in Leviticus, 216 in Numbers, 35 in Deuteronomy, 51 in Joshua, and 47 verses in the other historical books. Psalms and Proverbs refer to him. In the New Testament, he's mentioned 37 times in the Gospels, 19 in Acts, and 22 verses in the epistles that Paul and Peter wrote. And he's even referenced in the book of Revelation. Altogether, Moses is mentioned or referenced in 784 verses in the Bible. If you take him out of the Bible gets a whole lot smaller. He's one of the greatest men God ever made. He was an emancipator and lawgiver of Israel. He was also a scholar, a soldier, a statesman, and a saint. He was one of 2 men that was sent back from heaven on the Mount of Transfiguration to let everybody know and testify to who Jesus really was. But much of this credit for what he became, however, must be given to his mother, Jochebed. As the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Harold Macmillan, once said, "No man succeeds without a good woman behind him, wife or mother. If it is both, he is twice blessed indeed." And so today we're spending some time seeing what Jochebed did and how you and I can apply that to our lives today. But before we can take a look at what Jochebed did, we need to kind of set the stage. We need to understand the significance in the choices that she made. So last week on graduation Sunday, I talked about a guy named Joseph. How God used Joseph to save his family, all of Egypt, and pretty much the entire world at that time. But time passes by and stories fade. And this is where we find ourselves today. Exodus 1, starting with verse 8. Now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, "Behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land." Therefore, they sent taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities of Pithom and Ramses. But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and all kinds of work in the field. And all the work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. See, after moving all of his family to Egypt, Joseph's family stayed and settled there. What he did was so great in Pharaoh's eyes that Pharaoh said, "Hey, anywhere you want to live in Egypt, you can have." And he picked the land of Goshen, which is one of the most fertile and best areas of Egypt. Their livestock and everything else, and they multiplied there, and they grew larger and larger in number. For about 400 years, they just grew into this massive nation. So the Pharaoh, instead of trying to make friends with them and becoming allies with them, began to fear them. And in our lives, when we fear something, we begin to make very irrational decisions. We begin to do things that aren't smart. And that's what Pharaoh did here. And so he enslaved Israel. He put them to labor and work, but that didn't slow them down. And so Pharaoh, still scared, made another decree. We find that in verse 22. Then Pharaoh commanded all of his people, "Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall cast into the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live." You see, Pharaoh decided to enact a population control program. Kill all the new male-born babies. You reduce your male workforce, sure, but you also reduce the number of people, the warriors, who would fight against you if war ever broke out. It's a very harsh decree. And he put soldiers and people in place to make that decree happen. But we will see that not everybody cared at all what Pharaoh had to say. Picking up in Exodus 2, we'll start with verse 1. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman, which is Jochebed. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took him for a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with pitman and pitch, put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Can I just pause right here and say that there's all kind of crazy happening in this 4 verses. I don't know if y'all read the Bible like I read the Bible, but I just read all kinds of nonsense going on right here, right? First, we see Jochebed defying Pharaoh, which is heroic unless you get caught. And if you get caught, guess what happens to you and your family and all your other kids? They kill everybody. So instead of one child being gone, the whole family gets wiped off. So that's a pretty big move. Again, if it works out for you, you're a hero. If it doesn't work out for you, you just become a statistic. Second, they put the baby in a basket in the Nile. Now, I love watching nature shows. I just finished watching a series on Disney Plus on the Nat Geo side of it called Africa's Deadliest, okay? And in this video, they show like predators eating prey. And like, it's not one of those shows where the prey always gets away. Actually, the prey gets away about 30% of the time. Usually the predators win, so you get to see all kinds of eating. But one of the predators they highlight is this reptilian known as a crocodile. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but crocodiles are found all over Africa. But the largest crocodiles in the world are found in one particular place. It's a river in the north of Africa called the Nile. Yes, the same river that they put baby Moses in, that is where they put him. It was all these crocodiles. So I'm not finding that the best move. Second, they put him in a wicker basket. Last time I checked, I'm not an engineering major, but a little common sense. Wicker is not known as the strongest building material ever. Like I don't see a lot of wicker houses on the road. So here you go. Here's some wicker basket to put the baby in crocodile-infested waters. Makes perfect sense to me. The third reason I find complete nonsense in all this is that babies cry like all the time. Take that back, not all the time. Sometimes they poop and sometimes they eat. But otherwise, they're crying. And so the baby's crying all the time. So you now take a baby who's not getting fed regularly and put him into a basket in the water. He got to be crying. I remember when Benjamin was a little boy, a baby, he was super fussy. He cried like all the time, nonstop. Like I would find myself at 3 a.m. in the morning, pacing downstairs while I was sleeping upstairs, like trying to keep him quiet and back and forth. And he would just scream and scream and scream and scream. I would go into like the bathroom downstairs and turn on the exhaust fan. One of two things, hoping it would either muffle his screaming or that maybe the sound of the white noise would put him to sleep. Neither of those worked very well. And he would just scream and scream and scream. Now, he doesn't do that anymore, okay? He's grown up. Now I only have to hold him every couple nights. It's not too bad, all right? What am I kidding? Ain't nobody holding that giant. He's going to have to hold me, But that's what's going on here. You got this baby who I guarantee you is crying. People walk by the Nile hearing a crying baby like, oh, there's a baby. But no one did anything about it, right? But it's just crazy. This is what their solution to this problem was. And finally, the most logical and non-crazy of all the things that happened is Jochebed knew, hey, I'm putting this baby out there. Maybe I should put somebody to watch them. Middle school girl. Perfect. I can't think of a better person to watch a newborn child than a middle school girl. I mean, can you imagine her standing there? Miriam's like, great, I get to do what? How long? All day? But my friends, I don't know. I can see her taking selfies and snapping her friends on the Facegram, being like, hey, watching your little bro by the Nile, so cringe. Like you can totally see that happening. I mean, middle school girls are known for their long attention spans and ability to stay focused for long periods of time. But that's who we put in charge of this baby, right? So this is like insanity happening here on so many levels. But this is what happens. But it was a good thing that Miriam ended up being there because Moses got found out. Verse 5. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. See, I told you, they cry all the time. Baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses because, she said, I drew him out of the water. So first off, we find all this crazy stuff happening in the previous verses, but then it continues down here. Even though the baby was crying, when Pharaoh's daughter found it, she took pity on the baby. She wasn't interested in killing it. She wasn't interested in obeying her father. Some scholars think that this princess was actually Hatshepsut, who, if you know, became a pharaoh herself and was totally against the establishment. And so she was probably a rebellious princess, like, I'm not interested in doing what my dad says. I'm going to go against the flow. But anyway, the baby, she decided not to kill. But moms, how many times have you been at home and your kids come walking, especially over the summer? Hey, mom, we found a bird with a hurt wing. Hey, we found this baby squirrel. Hey, we found a dog. Can we keep it? And you're like, no, that's the neighbor's dog. We can't keep it, okay? It belongs to them. But they always find things they want to keep. And so here's Pharaoh's daughter. I found a baby. Can I keep it, right? She wants to hold on to it and keep it. The servants all tell Pharaoh's daughter it's a Hebrew baby. But she's like, I still want to adopt it. I want to make it mine. Now, back in this day, nobility didn't take care of their kids. Okay, they had a baby, and they hired nursemaids to take care of the children. Like, they didn't even see them for the first 4 or 5 years of their life. And so Pharaoh's daughter's like, I'm going to need somebody to take care of this baby, right? So Miriam, Moses' sister, asked Pharaoh's daughter, hey, shall I find a nurse for you? Now, again, I don't know if you read the Bible like everybody else, but I already found some issues in this next little part, okay? Because Miriam, middle schoolers, was like, oh, I got to stop posting for a minute and go talk to the Pharaoh's daughter. Like, this is Pharaoh's daughter. Don't you think there'd be like bodyguards around? So like you find this baby floating in the river, and then some strange middle school girl walks up to you. Hey, do you need somebody to watch that baby? And Pharaoh's daughter's like, you know what? I really do. I have a strange child asking me about a strange baby. Sure, I need some help. She's like, hey, I'll go find another strange person who you do not know to watch that kid. And Pharaoh's daughter's like, that sounds excellent. Thank you so much. But this is what happens, okay? This is real life. I'm not making this up. So Miriam goes and gets her mom, who is Moses' mom, to raise the baby. And on top of that, mothers, y'all do a lot of things right, but one thing you did wrong, you got to find you a Pharaoh's daughter in life. Because she gets to keep her baby, and then she gets paid for watching her own kid. How many of you get paid for watching your own kid? And your husband's like, well, I work and I provide. No, that's different. How many of you pay your wives for watching your kids? But that's what happens here. She gets paid to watch her own kid. I just love the fact that it's like, I don't know any of these people, but sure, you can watch this baby and bring it back. It'll be fine. And so what we see happening here is that Moses' mother, Jochebed, gets him back and gets to raise him for about 4 years. That was the time length usually where they nursed children and took care of them until they could be weaned and ready to go. So we see these 4 years of Moses' life with his actual mother before he's taken to the palace to become an Egyptian royalty. You see, there's a lot going on in this story that's absolutely crazy. But moms are like that sometimes. Moms are totally crazy. Like when you were a kid, right, and you get a cut or you break a bone, like the first thing mom says is, do you want me to kiss it and make it better? Now, no kids ever like, no, actually, I'd like you to call a doctor, a medical professional to look at this arm that's bent 90 degrees and maybe they could fix it. But what do? Yes, kiss my arm. And for some reason, when mom kisses it, guess what? It feels better. Now, it's still dangling at 90 degrees like it shouldn't, but it feels better, right? Moms do that. They do things all the time that don't make any sense, but somehow it works. It just works for moms. Dads try to do it and the whole house burns down. But hey, it's okay. Moms are there and they take care of you and they make things happen. And we're going to see today that in all of this craziness, I believe there's 3 characteristics of motherhood that we can pull out of this that are super important for our moms today, but also for all of us to remember. The first is this: a godly mother goes against the flow. Moms often set the tone of what's acceptable or not acceptable in the house. You may have heard her say something to the effect, I don't care if everybody else is doing it. We're not doing that in this house. But the truth is, a godly mother is cool enough not to be cool. She doesn't care what everybody else thinks about her. She's not afraid to go against the world and deem what's acceptable and okay. C.S. Lewis wrote this one time: when the whole world is running towards a cliff, he who is running in the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind. But going in the opposite direction is the only thing that actually saves you. When your mother says, no, you can't do what all your friends are doing, no, you can't go and do that, she's making decisions for your good, not for your cool points. Because she cares more about you as a person than your reputation. She wants you to be successful in life. A godly mother runs towards Christ and brings her children in tow. She doesn't care what people think about her, how they view her, what they say about her. She's only concerned with how she looks in the eyes of God. Now, a second characteristic of a godly mother we can pull from this passage is this: a godly mother loves you enough to let you go. We could do a whole sermon series about mothers in the Bible letting their children go. Hannah, who so desperately wanted a child, she went to the tabernacle, pleaded before God to give her a baby. And when God gives her baby, Samuel, what does she do? She raises that baby to about the age of 4 and then takes him back and dedicates his life to God like she promised. Or we have in the book of Kings, when Solomon was king and these two women were fighting over a baby because they both had babies and one fell asleep and laid on top of her baby and killed it. And they go to Solomon and they're both claiming, this is my baby, this is my baby. And Solomon, wisest man of all time, says, tell you what to do. Give me a sword, cut the baby in half. Then each of you can have half a baby. The first mother, who wasn't really the mother, said, hey, that sounds fair to me. Let's do that. But the baby's mom was like, no. Let her have it. Because I'd rather give my baby away than see it die. And probably the most impactful mother who gave her child away is Mary. As she sat at the foot of the cross, watching her son be crucified. Because she understood his purpose was greater than anything she could ever understand. And so she let him go to do what only he could do. Sometimes the bravest thing a mom can ever do is to let go of a child that belongs to God even more than it belongs to her. Maybe that's an important word for some of you moms who are about to send your kindergartner off to first grade for the first time, or your preschooler to kindergarten in the fall. And you're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I have to send them off to the world. Are they ready for this? And you need that encouragement that it's okay, you can send them off. Or maybe you're a mom in here who's about to send your child off to college in the fall. And that's a hard move for you. Because let's be honest, when they're middle schoolers, you're like, hey, so there's these out-of-state schools that look really good, or there's a study abroad program far, far away. I think maybe you should go do that right now, you know? But then as they get into their senior year and it gets closer and closer, you're starting like, hey, there's a community college like 4 miles from the house. It's fantastic. Greatest community college ever made. Maybe you should go to that community college, right? Because mom wants you close by. But sometimes we have to let them go. We have to release them. As students, you have no clue what I'm talking about right now. But one day, when you have kids and you're facing those choices, you will understand that when mom and dad took you to college and put your stuff in the room and said, we'll see you later, that mom cried for the next 4 hours. Dad did too, he just did it on the inside, okay? But you're gonna understand that's what happened. That there's so much there, but they understand to love you best, sometimes we have to let you go. And so we see this happening. Sometimes the bravest thing a mom can do is to let go of the child that belongs to God more than it belongs to her. The last characteristic we see in a godly mom is this: a godly mom teaches their children well. Moses was only with his real mom to 3 to 4 years, but those were defining years for him. Years later, when he was living in Pharaoh's palace, he didn't consider them his own people. He considered the Hebrew people his people. I mean, we see he fled Egypt because he saw 2 Israelites fighting amongst themselves and intervened on them. He killed an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew because he cared more about the Hebrews than he did the Egyptians. See, we don't always see the immediate impact of what we do as parents, but one day our kids will let us know how we did. Probably the best known Christian mother from antiquity is Monica, the mother of St. Augustine of Hippo. Mother of 3 children, wife to a difficult man, she longed to secure every good thing for Augustine. Early in his life, This meant sending him to the best schools, advancing his career, and protecting him from a socially disadvantageous marriage. Later, she devoted herself to a different goal, drawing her son into the kingdom of God. Monica had great influence on Augustine's life. It is said that her example and her prayers, even without support from her husband, eventually led Augustine to the Lord. In his autobiography, Augustine said this: "My mother shed more tears for my spiritual death than other mothers shed for the bodily death of the son." A godly mother can have generational impacts on her family. We see this when Paul is writing to Timothy. He says this, 2 Timothy 3:14 through 15. "But as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from where you learned it, and how from childhood you've been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Jesus Christ." I want you to see something important here. In verse 14, he says, "Remember where you learned it from." Because here's the thing, Timothy's dad was a Gentile, didn't know God. Everything he learned from his mother and his grandmother. 2 Timothy 1:5, Paul says this: "I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well." You see, everything Timothy learned to serve God, he learned from his mama. But Paul points out, you learned that at a young age. When you listened, when you paid attention, your mother showed you things and taught you things that will change your life forever. A godly mother makes all the difference in the life of their children and grandchildren. So as we close today, I want to thank all of you godly mothers out there for your faithfulness, not to your children, not to your husbands, but your faithfulness towards God. That you've chose to follow after him and be a light and an example for your entire family. Raising your children to follow after him, teaching them to obey him, no matter what. And that is the hardest and one of the most thankless things you can ever do in your life. It's to follow after God and bring your children along. But it changes eternity. And for that, we are all grateful. Proverbs ends in the 31st chapter, and it talks about the marks of a woman. In verse 30, though, it says this: "Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised." And so today, we honor and celebrate all of you mothers who chase after God and bring your family in tow, who are bright lights in a dark world, and who love God with all they have. Happy Mother's Day. We love you.